For the first part, it's about central management. Um, for the central management, it's a integrated wireless networking solution. Is that to use one central network access controller to manage the multiple branch network access controller. Uh, so easily says is that you can use the controller in headquarters to manage the controller in the branch, to use one controller to manage the other controller. So this is the central management. And what we can do with the central management, this is to make the redundancy to backup. It can perfectly solve the problem of single gateway data forwarding bottleneck and later operation and maintenance the data analysis. So, for example, if we have only one access point and has only one access controller, but what if this controller just break down? If it break down, my business will be it will get some interference and it cannot work. So with the central management, because I use the controller in headquarters to manage the other controller, and after some controller in the branch it break down, the controller in headquarters can take over the control of the branch access point. So it can keep the business still working smoothly. The application scenario is applicable to the scenario with high network redundancy requirements, such as the financial industrial. Uh, just give an example. In China, they have the China Bank, and in the Bank of China headquarter, we use the um, controller and install in the headquarter. And in the branch, we have the seed controller. And with the multi-level hosted disaster recovery, it can greatly improve the reliability because for the financial industrial, uh, it has a higher requirement for the redundancy and reliability because sometimes if the system failure and it will a big loss of money of the business. So the branch network controller achieve can with the central management can achieve the high reliability through one plus one uh, dual motion redundant hot backup. In addition, the central controller will perform the redundant backup of all the branch NC when the branch network controller fails or its breakdown. The central NC immediately take over the control of the branch access point, and it can help you to realize complete transparency and no perception to the end user. So after it change, after the controller in branch breakdown and the control change to the controller in headquarter, and the user they cannot feeling that there is some failure. In the user, the experience will be really uh, wonderful. As before, we said that for Sundray redundancy, we have the controller one plus one. Actually, for the controller one plus one, we use the VRRP with the VRRP policy. Here, for the controller one plus one remote backup, this one it's about our central management. As the picture shows, in the headquarters, there is two controller with the VRP group. One is master, one is backup, and the controller in headquarters can with the central management can manage all the state controller in branch A, branch B, and branch C or branch N. And if the controller in branch B is break down, the access point in the branch B will be controlled uh, by the controller in headquarters, by the central controller. So the all the network for the user from the user side, the network will always working. Okay, actually for the central management, we have two versions. Central management version 1, it's the CM feature we developed long ago. This one is to use a controller as the central controller, and this controller has two functions. This manages the local access point as the controller, and also it can manage and monitor the branch controller. For this kind of for the CM feature version 1, the top is like the picture in the left side. As we know, in the headquarters, the central NAC manages the local access point and manages the branch NAC. But with this kind of structure, it cannot do the it cannot manage the authentication or other feature. So it will has so many limitation. And after some time, we developed the central management function to the version 1, and it can solve so many problems before. For the structure of central management version 1 is to use the controller as the central end. And this central end actually it has two functions. The first is the SC central end and the local controller. So the local controller, it's a virtual controller, and use the virtual controller to manage the local controller. So the SC central end is responsible for delivering the configuration to the branch controller and to the local NAC. The local controller is responsible for managing the access point. By this way, it can exceed many limitations because we use the SC central and to manage the controller in the branch and in the local. Actually, this is the comparison table of central management version 1 and version 2. For example, before, for the controller disaster recovery, central management version 1, it can only support N+1 disaster recovery. But for version 2, it already supports N+1 and 1+1 disaster recovery. Also for the AP hosting, it can now for the central management version 2, it can not only to support AP hosting, and the controller can join N+1 and 1+1 disaster recovery, and then by default to enable the AP hosting. You don't need to manually configure the AP hosting like before. And also for the central NAC unified authorization for the central management version 1, the branch NAC need to open the corresponding license. But for central management version 2, license only need to open on the central NAC. For example, you have a project you want to use the CM function, the central management function. Further, before you need to buy all the license for the branch and for the controller, and because you want to let the controller to join the central management group. So you need to make sure all the controller in branch and in headquarters has central management license. But for version 2, after we upgrade to version 2, the license, you only need to keep that the license in the central network access controller is valid. So in the branch, you don't need to care about the branch controller, whether it's already enabled the CM license. So it can save a lot of money for the CM license for each branch. And also for the CM Central Management version 2, the branch controller can support plug and play. The branch service is convenient configuration, and the Sundray and supports the Sundray cloud management. For the central management version 2, the different branch can support with the different switch policy. Because in different branch they have the different switch, and for the local switch management, you can set the different policy. But for before you cannot. For version 1 you cannot set it. But after you upgrade to the version 2, it can support to manage the switch policy. Also, not only the switch policy, about the security policy, the AP policy, and the different authentication advanced options. For the version 2, it also can support it. Actually, for now, in the controller, the central management function, it's version 2 by default, so it can support all these function now. Okay, for the central management configuration, it's quite easy to make the access controller to join in the central management. The first, you need to make sure that in the central controller, the CM license manages the seed controllers is valid. You just need to make sure that in the central controller, the CM license is valid. In the branch controller or the seed controller, the license is not needed. And being joined to central management, a wireless access controller could work as the CMS, or could either work as the central management controller or seed controller. So when you enable the CM function, you can choose it as the central management controller or as the seed controller. When you choose it to as the central management controller, you need to make sure the license it's valid. And for all seed controllers are under the control of one central management controller and be monitored or managed. So you may choose the most appropriate model for a seed controller here according to your network. Okay, so where is the central management feature? In the WLAN controller, we can go to the cluster. The first is under the cluster. The first is the central management. So here in the central management, we can enable the CM and to specify the controller type, whether it's the central controller or the seed controller. And In the maintenance mode, the state controller couldn't change the settings, push it down from the central management controller, nor receive any new changes. It means in the maintenance mode, all the settings will come from the central controller, and for the state controller, it can only uh, get the configuration from headquarters, and it cannot change by himself. If the version of the software, if the version of the software installed on this set controller is different from that installed on the CMS controller, the controller will change or be changed to maintenance mode. This one means that if the controller is the different software version, for example, in the headquarter, if the controller version is 3.8.0.3, the latest version, and for the controller in the branch, it's 3.7. In this kind of a situation, the state controller can only uh, set to the management mode. It cannot because the firmware is not the same. So it can only working as a maintenance mode. Okay, here is to enable the to set the controller type. If we want to make this controller as the central management controller, uh, just select the CMS controller and to uh, input the password and confirm the password. Actually, this password is required when our state controller want to want to leave from the central management group. And for the state controller, we choose the state controller and to input the primary central management controller address. For the central management controller type, it can be the virtual CMC in cloud, and it can also be the virtual CMC with the private address. Actually, the software controller, it can also work as the central management controller, and to input the account and the password. For the mode, there is the monitoring mode and the management mode. For the monitor mode, the state controller owns independent settings, while the CMS controller only monitors the running process of the state controller. For the management mode, the state controller, the controller settings are pushed down from the central management controller, except the special settings that must be configured on the state controller. The settings will get from CMC controller, including the WLAN, the role, and etc. And it cannot be changed on the state controller. So what we can change in the management mode, owning some network settings, some local network settings. You can change, but for the other authentication policy, WLAN policy, all these settings is from the central management controller.